A 31-year-old man stripped completely naked in the middle of the woods and began frantically running, wading through swamps while constantly looking over his shoulder. But to what end? The man in question is a guy by the name of Jaren Kuester. Jaren Kuester was born on February 1st, 1982 to his parents Jim and Kathleen Kuester. At an unspecified later date, his parents divorced and they lived in separate houses. For the majority of his life, Jaren stayed around the Waukesha County area located in Wisconsin. Not much has been documented about his childhood or early years growing up. He has 5 brothers, and all of them dabbled in wrestling and mixed martial arts while growing up to varying degrees. For Jaren, his dream was to become a professional MMA fighter. However, his mental struggles and getting into trouble would be constant barriers that would need to be addressed. Between the age of 14 and 15, so around 1996 to 1997, Jaren started receiving psychiatric help due to his attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD. He was diagnosed with depression roughly a year later at age 16. It's in these teenage years that mischief and violence would emerge in full force. He would garner the ire of his neighbors for being a known pest and troublemaker. Neighbors said they didn't want their kids around him due to his behavior. They also took notice of police visiting the Kuester home more than a few times throughout the years, typically due to Jaren's behavior. On one such visit in November of 2000, police were called to the Kuester residence to find Jaren trashing the house. Jaren had broken doors and damaged walls of his parents' home. When his father Jim tried to stop him, he was tackled and had Gatorade thrown onto his face. Jaren also broke Jim's glasses during the attack. Only a year after the November assault, in November of 2001, Jaren and 4 other unnamed individuals attacked another person in the streets. The male victim was found with blood on his face and his shirt and had a 2-inch gash that required staples to close. It turns out Jaren had hit the man with a billy club upside the head. He later claimed he aimed for the man's butt and hit his head by accident, but witnesses claimed Jaren and the victim were both standing before the billy club was swung and that the victim was cracked in the head with it intentionally before being attacked by the 4 others that were with Jaren. Kuester was convicted of battery for the November 2000 attack. He was also convicted of battery, disorderly conduct, and carrying a concealed weapon for the 2001 incident. Between 2001 to 2005, he went on to incur many other unspecified violations in the next few years, with most of them being traffic related. This includes one incident of operating a vehicle with a suspended license. Within this year span, he began working as a bartender and waiter while training at a local MMA gym with aspirations to go pro. He was said to be very social and outgoing around this time. Needless to say, this didn't last. In 2006, Jaren's parents noticed his mental state was degrading rapidly. He became less social and extremely paranoid. He withdrew himself from friends and acquaintances, choosing to only hang around his parents and brothers. He lost his job as a waiter and began living inside of his car. Sometimes he would stay with one of his parents or brothers for a few days, but it was never for long. It's unknown if an event or something else triggered this sudden behavior change around 2006, or if it was just mental deterioration over time. His mental state was serious enough that he began receiving disability payments while seeing a psychiatrist through the Waukesha County Health Services. The health services system was said to offer many services to help their patients out, such as a comprehensive support program, but seeing as how Jaren was a voluntary patient and not a court-ordered patient, he could pick and choose what he wanted, and he opted out of any additional services. He was given medication as well, but was inconsistent with taking it. Unfortunately, his mental state continued to worsen. In 2009, someone at a gas station in a nearby town noticed a man wandering around in the parking lot, soaking wet and dripping water everywhere, looking confused. Police were then called due to the man's odd behavior. When police arrived, they got him to hand over his wallet, which had his ID inside. This man was Jaren Kuester. It turns out Jaren had been in a delusional state. In this state, he thought that a girl he went to high school with had been killed by demons. He claimed that he knew the demons had gotten to her and tortured her, and that he was next. This revelation caused him to run off through forests and swampland for roughly 16 hours. During this delusion, he also thought he was being followed and claimed to hear helicopters overhead looking for him. He ditched his cell phone and coat and traversed through swampland, barbed wire fencing, and harsh woodland for 16 hours to get away from the demons, eventually ending up at the gas station where police found him. He asked them to bring him to any homeless shelter as he was between homes. Instead, his parents picked him up and brought him to Waukesha Memorial Hospital. On the way there, he screamed and believed he was being taken there to be tortured. His mother states that after this event he was never truly normal again and never fully rebounded. He continued to go into these delusional states over the next few years, often citing demonic forces following him at all times and getting into trouble with the local law enforcement over various violent infractions. His parents said around this time he was prescribed medication, but they refused to say what his diagnosis was. He was inconsistent with taking this medication as well. Everything came to a very unfortunate climax in early 2013 in April. In the first week of April 2013, Jaren's 6-month-old dog Armani, a pit bull lab mix, was hit by a car and died. This tragedy to most people would be absolutely devastating. For someone in Jaren's degraded mental state, it impacted him far worse, sending him over the edge and amplifying his delusions further. Jaren took Armani to the local animal services facility where he was cremated. Jaren then left the facility. The death of his puppy Armani seemed to break him. Soon after, his parents heard him talking to his brother, discussing the demons more intensely, saying that now they were everywhere and were out to get him again. In the last week of April, his mental state was at its absolute worst. Jaren's father, Jim, took him to a meeting with a county social services officer in an attempt to get him evaluated. Jaren stormed out of the meeting while shouting that nothing was wrong with him. On April 25th, Jaren returned to the animal services building where he demanded his dog back. He accused employees of holding illegal dog fights at the facility, saying they were using his dog in the dog fights. He attempted to go back into the employee-only area while yelling at the staff. Police were called after his refusal to leave, and Jaren was arrested on an old warrant for resisting arrest and obstructing an officer. He was jailed and bail was set at $303. His father did not want him to be bailed out and instead wanted him to be given a psychiatric evaluation due to his worsening behavior. This never came to be as Jaren kept refusing, saying there was nothing wrong with him. Law enforcement officers had Jaren speak with a social worker and sheriff's deputies, but by their determination, Jaren didn't appear to be dangerous to himself or others, and so legally they couldn't involuntarily commit him. A handyman that sometimes hired Jaren paid the $303 bail and Jaren was released. Upon being released, a horrific series of events followed. Jaren got a ride to his vehicle, still located outside of the Animal Services Center. Jaren then got into his car, a green Mercury Mountaineer, and drove aimlessly for over 100 miles to the neighboring Lafayette County. Toward the end of his 100-mile journey, he believed he was being followed, and in a panic, he abandoned his car and ran into a nearby forest. In the forest, he took off his clothing and got completely nude, then proceeded to wade through a swamp and continued running through the woods. He hung his clothing on trees and a nearby deer stand within the forest. During this time, he claimed to hear God talking to him and guiding him. Jaren spent hours wandering around inside the woods, crashing through rough terrain and swimming through rivers. By the time Jaren came out of the woods, he had traveled 5 to 6 miles and it was sunset. He soon saw a farmhouse, which he then entered by breaking a side window. As he entered, he cut his hand badly on the broken glass. The owners of this house were an elderly couple, Gary and Chloe Thorson. They happened to be out of town visiting relatives in California. While they were out of town, Gary's brother Dean Thorson periodically checked on the house. As Jaren wandered around the house, he found that nobody was home. He helped himself to some food and got dressed in clothing he found in one of the closets. Jaren stayed the night inside of the house where he slept on the bedroom floor. At around 2:30 p.m. the next day, Jaren heard a vehicle approaching. He grabbed a fire poker from the fireplace and ran upstairs to avoid detection. Dean Thorson entered the home and eventually went up the stairs. When Dean reached the top of the stairs, Jaren came out and hit him repeatedly in the head with the fire poker, resulting in his death. Jaren then covered Dean's body with a blanket and obtained his car keys from his pocket. Then he moved Dean's truck into the garage of the house so that it wouldn't be seen by the neighbors. At some point during the day, Jaren moved his own vehicle to the wood line close to the house. Dean Thorson's wife, Rose, had been trying to call Dean for hours and it was now getting closer to nightfall. Worried, she reported him missing to the police. Meanwhile, Gary and Chloe Thorson had stopped by on their way home after hearing about Dean being missing. They assured Rose that they were going to go home and get their ATVs to go search for Dean. In the evening, Jaren heard a man and a woman entering the house. This was Gary and Chloe Thorson, the homeowners. As Jaren hid upstairs, he heard Chloe say that she saw blood. Jaren soon appeared and hit Chloe with the fireplace poker, then stabbed her with the pointed end repeatedly, killing her. Gary Thorson was then beaten to death with the fire poker in a manner similar to Dean. Afterwards, Jaren took money from Gary's wallet, then got into the couple's vehicle and moved it into the garage before returning back inside. In a panic, Jaren decided that he had to leave. He grabbed money, blankets, clothing, and a metal rod to use for protection against the demons. He then got into Dean's F-150 truck and drove it to his father's house. The Thorsons' neighbors saw a strange SUV near their property parked against the wood line. They had seen this car the previous day at about 6 p.m. pulling into the driveway they shared with the Thorsons, but figured the person inside was a friend of the Thorsons and was visiting them. After seeing this vehicle parked near the tree line, they thought it was an illegal hunter's vehicle and called the police. The police arrived, and after searching the area, they found shoes and a jail ID tag for Jaren Kuester. Jaren had been reported missing between the time he left the jail and the time he spent at the Thorson residence. The officer on scene called for backup to expand the search for Jaren. Only a few hundred meters away during the search, the Thorsons lay dead inside their own home. During this time, nobody checked the Thorson residence for Jaren or noticed the broken, bloody window. The search for Jaren ended right before 9 p.m. due to darkness obstructing the searcher's eyesight. The next morning, April 28th at 9:54 a.m., Gary and Dean's brother Everett Thorson entered the home of Gary and Chloe and found their bodies inside. Police were called to the scene where they found Gary and Chloe's bodies in the downstairs basement bathroom. At the top of the stairs, police located Dean's body covered with a blanket. While still searching for Jaren, police found him at his father's apartment. He had several small cuts on him along with dried blood on both of his feet. Jaren also had visible lacerations on his left hand from the broken window he crawled through. After speaking with Jaren's father, he informed them that Jaren had arrived at his apartment and claimed that he had hurt 3 people. Seeing as how this information lined up with the fresh murder case they had, police connected the dots. Police soon noticed the F-150 truck outside of the residence. When they searched the license plate number in their database, it came back as being owned by the Thorson brothers. Dean's wife confirmed that Dean had been driving the F-150 prior to his murder. Upon being brought in for questioning, Jaren confessed. He gave a detailed account of how he drove his Mercury Mountaineer, abandoned it, got naked in the woods, found the Thorson residence, and explained the ghastly events that ended with the deaths of Gary, Chloe, and Dean Thorson. Just under 1 year removed from the murders, on January 31st, 2014, Jaren Kuester was found not guilty for the 3 deaths by reason of mental disease or defect. However, due to the latter, he was sentenced to a lifetime commitment at the Mendota Mental Health Institute where he resides today. Jaren's parents went on to blame Waukesha County's mental health system, claiming he should have been committed before this tragedy was allowed to unfold. The head of the county's mental health system claimed Kuester didn't meet the criteria that would have allowed Jaren to be involuntarily held and stood by his decision. However you view the case and whether it was preventable or not, this was an absolute tragedy for all families involved. Gary Thorson, age 70, and his wife Chloe Thorson, age 66, had been married for 40 years and are survived by their 2 children and 5 grandchildren. Gary Thorson served in the Army National Guard, then had been a computer programmer in his younger days for around 10 years, then became a pig farmer along with his brothers Everett and Dean. Chloe was a medical transcriptionist at Monroe Clinic Hospital for over 20 years and had just retired in 2012, 1 year prior to being attacked. The couple enjoyed vacationing together in San Diego and Colorado, where they would bike and canoe. Dean Thorson, age 76, was a U.S. Army veteran. He was a member of the local church council and served on the Lafayette County Board. He loved farming and working outdoors. They will be dearly missed. Hey y'all, I'm Jeremy the Crime Historian, and that's about all I have for you. I'm checking out now, and I will see you in the next case. If you enjoyed the video, you know what to do to help out. Consider subscribing if you want to see about 2 videos per week from me. Thanks, and peace guys.